If I'm being real, it didn't start out like some grand betrayal. There wasn't some evil mastermind plan scribbled on the back of a napkin. It was just a Tuesday. Rain spattered against my apartment windows like the soundtrack to every bad decision I've ever made. I was sitting at O'Malley's bar, that dive on Fourth with the sticky floors and pool tables that haven't been level since Reagan was in office. Across from me sat Kyle. Yeah, that Kyle. The guy who treats gossip like it's currency, and he's Jeff Bezos of the rumor economy. We were a couple of beers deep, and like an idiot, I decided to vent. Man, Jess has this side of her I didn't even know about. I started, swirling the amber liquid like it held some kind of wisdom. Kyle leaned in like a shark circling chum. Yeah? Like what? And instead of keeping my mouth shut like a responsible adult, like a boyfriend, I let it slip. She's got this account, I said under my breath. Photos. You know, the kind that aren't exactly Sunday school approved. I didn't even say where or how or what the username was. But that's the thing about Kyle. Give him an inch, and he'll map out the whole coastline. He whistled low. No kidding? And she's working at that fancy private school, right? Whoa, that's risky, man. At that moment, I felt this uneasy twist in my gut. Like my subconscious had hit the panic button, but the message didn't reach my brain in time. Keep it between us, all right? I added, way too late. Kyle gave me that trademark smirk. The one that says, sure, buddy. Whatever you say, while his brain's already filing it under top 10 conversations to exploit later. I went home that night thinking nothing of it. Just a harmless vent session, right? Wrong. Dead wrong. By Thursday, Jess wasn't answering my texts. Friday, she came home early, her face pale as snow, and her hands shaking. They fired me, she choked out, standing in our doorway like a ghost of herself. My heart stopped. Wait, what? Fired? For what? She looked up at me, eyes red-rimmed and hollow. They found out about my photos. Someone told the board. I swear, time slowed to a crawl. Every beer I drank, every word I spoke at that bar replayed in my mind like a damning highlight reel. And all I could think, over and over, was, what did I just do? There's a strange silence that settles in after you wreck something important. Not loud, not chaotic, just empty. Like the world itself hit mute and left you alone with the echo of your mistakes. Just stood there, her keys dangling from her trembling fingers, eyes locked on me like she was staring at the remains of a bridge I just torched. Jess. I didn't. The words stumbled out, half-formed and useless. She shook her head, a bitter, hollow laugh escaping her lips. You didn't what, exactly? You didn't mean to? You didn't think it'd matter? I felt like a man standing in the middle of a burning house, wondering which wall to put out first. Who told them? She demanded. And that's when I realized the full horror of it. Kyle. It had to be. And knowing him, he probably didn't just whisper it to one person. He turned it into a full-blown social event. I swallowed hard. Kyle. Look, it just slipped. I didn't think he'd, You didn't think. Her voice cracked like glass under pressure. God, do you even hear yourself? Jess turned away, pacing like she needed to physically outrun the betrayal sitting between us. They called me into the office this morning, she started, her voice low and shaking. Principal Harmon sat there with this smug little expression, told me they had concerns about my extracurricular activities. Like I'm some scandal waiting to happen. I've worked there for 5 years, and none of that mattered the second someone fed them gossip. My fists clenched so tight my knuckles turned white. I wanted to punch something or maybe just crawl under the floorboards and disappear. Jess. I'm going to fix this. The words left my mouth before my brain could object to the obvious impossibility of that promise. Her laugh was sharp and humorless. Fix this? Are you going to turn back time? Erase the whispers in the teacher's lounge? Because unless you've suddenly developed superpowers, I don't see how that's possible. I took a step closer, but she held up a hand. Don't, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Just don't. She grabbed her bag, stuffing random things into it, her laptop, her favorite sweater, the old paperback she always kept by the bed. Where are you going? I asked, panic tightening around my throat. Somewhere you're not, she shot back. And just like that, she walked out. The door slammed shut with a finality that felt like the end of everything. I sat down on the edge of the bed, staring at the empty doorway. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, Kyle. I answered it with the kind of quiet rage that could freeze fire. Dude, he started, crazy stuff going around about Jess, huh? Didn't think it'd blow up like this. I couldn't even form words. Just the sound of his voice made my hands shake. You told them. I managed to grind out. Hey, don't put this all on me. You're the one who I hung up, and in that dead silent apartment, it finally sank in. I hadn't just let a secret slip. I'd burned down someone's life for the cheap price of a conversation I didn't even need to have. But here's the thing about rock bottom. Either you stay there, or you start digging for a way out. And right then, I made a decision. I wasn't going to let this be the final chapter. It's funny how you never really notice how loud the world is until it's the silence that's unbearable. That night, the apartment felt like a tomb. Echoes of Jess's voice still hanging in the air, her perfume lingering like a cruel reminder of every moment I couldn't take back. But regret is a useless currency. Doesn't buy forgiveness. Doesn't rewind time. So, I did the only thing I could think of. I went to war with the mess I made. The first stop? Kyle. He was exactly where I expected, propped up at O'Malley's like he had a permanent reservation, laughing it up with his crew of morally bankrupt yes-men. The second he saw me storm through the door, his smile slipped. Guess he could read the weather in my eyes, and the forecast called for a hurricane. Kyle. I growled, grabbing him by the collar before he could stand up and slither his way out of it. Whoa, hey, chill, man. He glanced around, trying to play it cool like we weren't about 2 seconds away from turning O'Malley's into a fight club. You told them. I spat, my voice low and dangerous. You couldn't keep your mouth shut for 2 days? He squirmed, pulling my hands off his shirt like I was the unreasonable one here. Look, it's not my fault it spread. People talk, man. You dropped the bomb. I just lit the fuse. If that's not the worst apology in the history of bad apologies, I don't know what is. I slammed my fist against the table next to him. You're going to fix this. He laughed, a nervous, pathetic sound. How am I supposed to do that? It's already out there. You think a bunch of tight-laced school board members are going to just forget it? And that's when it hit me. No, they wouldn't forget. But maybe they'd be forced to reconsider. I left without another word. Didn't need to waste breath on a guy like Kyle. That night, I put together a plan. If Jess's career was going to burn because of some outdated sense of propriety, then I was going to shine a spotlight so bright on their hypocrisy that they'd have to cover their eyes. The next morning, I showed up at the school, clean-shaven, in my best shirt, with a folder full of receipts. Not literal receipts, but every scrap of evidence I could find about the principal and school board members who didn't exactly practice what they preached. Turns out, it's a whole lot easier to throw stones when your own windows are already cracked. Principal Harmon had a habit of bending financial rules for special projects. One board member was quietly running a side business that wasn't exactly family-friendly. Hypocrisy. Thy name is everyone in authority. I walked straight into Harmon's office. He looked up from his desk, his face the color of curdled milk when he saw me. You've got some nerve showing up here, he started. I placed the folder gently on his desk and leaned in. You've got 2 options. You can reconsider Jess's termination, or I can make sure the same people who ran her out of here get to read about your extracurricular activities on every local news outlet by Friday. Harmon's face twitched. He was a lot of things, arrogant, condescending, but stupid wasn't one of them. He knew I wasn't bluffing. I'll bring it to the board, he muttered. You do that, I said, turning to leave. And maybe take a long, hard look in the mirror while you're at it. I walked out of that office not knowing if it'd be enough. But for the first time in days, I wasn't just drowning in guilt. I was swimming toward the surface. Problem was, even if I could clear Jess's name, I still had to face the hardest part of all. Would she even want anything to do with me after that? It's a funny thing, bravery. You can stare down a room full of school board suits armed with nothing but a manila folder and pure desperation. But standing on the porch of the woman you betrayed? That'll make your knees weak in a way no corporate takedown ever could. I stood outside Jess's sister's apartment for a full 10 minutes, working through every version of the speech I'd practiced in my head. None of them sounded good enough. Probably because none of them were. I was about to turn around and bail. Again, when the door swung open. And there she was. Jess stood there in leggings and an oversized hoodie, her hair pulled back in that way that made her look both untouchably distant and heartbreakingly familiar. Her eyes landed on me like a heavyweight punch to the ribs. She crossed her arms. You've got some nerve showing up here. Deja vu, pretty sure I'd heard that line somewhere before. Only this time it actually hurt. I'm not here to make excuses. I started, my voice low. I'm just here to own it. All of it. She arched an eyebrow. Good. Because if you came here thinking a grand gesture was going to fix this, you might as well turn around. I nodded. I know. But I also know you're not the only one who lost something. She scoffed, stepping outside onto the porch, but keeping a solid 2 feet of emotional distance between us. Oh, please. You lost something? Enlighten me, because last I checked, I'm the one jobless with my reputation in a blender. I took a breath so deep it practically scraped my lungs clean. I lost you. And believe me, that's worse than any job or reputation hit. For a second, just a flicker, I saw her jaw tighten, and it gave me the smallest sliver of hope. I told her everything. How I confronted Kyle, how I went after Harmon and the board, how I practically blackmailed the system to make them reconsider. And why would you do that? She asked, her voice sharp but quieter now. Because if there's even a 1% chance I can fix what I broke, I'm going to take it, I said. You once told me you took those photos because they made you feel powerful, like you owned something no one could take from you. And my voice cracked. I was the idiot who proved even I could steal that from you. And I hate myself for it. For a moment, we stood there in the raw, messy silence that always follows brutal honesty. Finally, she sighed. They called me, she admitted, her voice softening for the first time. The school said there's going to be a board vote, that I could possibly get my job back. My heart thudded against my ribs so hard it felt like a punishment. I don't know if I even want it back, she added. I don't know if I want any of this back. Her eyes flicked up to meet mine. And you don't just get to do one good thing and expect forgiveness. That's not how this works. I nodded slowly. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for the chance to earn it. She held my gaze for a long moment, then stepped back toward the door. I guess we'll see, won't we? And just like that, she closed the door. Not slammed. Not locked. Just closed. And that was enough for now. You ever have one of those days where every hour feels like a week? That was me, pacing my apartment like a man waiting on a jury to decide his fate. Only this time, the jury wasn't 12 strangers. It was a board of people who cared more about their reputations than the actual lives they were affecting. And Jess? She was radio silent. No texts. No calls. Nothing but the distant hope that when the dust settled, there'd still be a path back to her. And maybe, just maybe, one for me too. By noon, I couldn't take it anymore. I threw on a jacket and drove past the school, the place where all of this had started unraveling. The parking lot was full, cars lined up like spectators at the scene of a wreck. The board was meeting. Right now. I parked across the street and sat there, my knuckles turning pale against the steering wheel. And then, as if the universe decided to throw me a bone, I saw her. Jess. Walking up the steps of the school, head held high, wearing a blazer that made her look like she was about to argue a Supreme Court case and win it. She was grace and fire wrapped in one package, and even from a distance, I could see the storm of emotions brewing behind her calm exterior. I wanted to run up to her. Say something. Anything. But this wasn't my moment to claim. It was hers. So, I waited. 1 hour turned into 2. People started trickling out, some with looks of indifference, others shaking their heads like they'd just witnessed something they couldn't unsee. And then she appeared. She walked down those steps slowly, her face unreadable. For a moment, she just stood there on the sidewalk, breathing like she'd run a marathon no one trained her for. I couldn't help myself. I crossed the street and stood a few feet away, close enough to see the tension in her shoulders, far enough to give her space. Well, I asked, my voice barely carrying over the soft breeze. She looked at me, a shining but unreadable. And then, with a shaky breath, she spoke. They voted to reinstate me, she said flatly. Effective immediately if I choose to accept. Relief flooded me, but it didn't last long. Because then she added, but I'm not taking it. That hit harder than I expected. You're not. She shook her head, her lips curving into the faintest, most bittersweet smile. I realized something sitting in that boardroom, listening to them justify their decision like they were doing me a favor. I don't want to work somewhere that sees me as a scandal to manage. I want to be somewhere I'm me, unapologetically. No hiding. No shame. It hit me then. This wasn't a loss. It was just claiming her power back in the loudest, quietest way possible. I'm starting over, she said. Somewhere new. On my terms this time. I swallowed hard, my voice thick. And where do I fit into that picture? She took a long, hard look at me. That's the thing, she said gently. I'm still figuring out what my new life looks like. And I need to know I'm doing it for me, not to fix what broke between us. I nodded, fighting the lump in my throat. I get it. And I'll be here, whatever you decide. She stepped closer then, close enough that I could see the tiny flecks of gold in her hazel eyes. Thank you for standing up for me, she whispered. But now it's my turn to stand up for myself. And with that, she walked away, this time not as someone running from the wreckage, but as someone walking straight toward a new horizon. I watched her go, knowing the story between us wasn't over. But for now, this was her chapter to write. 3 months. That's how long it had been since I stood on that sidewalk and watched Jess walk away, her heels clicking against the pavement like the closing beats of a song I didn't want to end. In that time, I tried everything people do when they're living in the aftermath. Gym membership? Got one. Read self-help books? Stacked on my nightstand like a personal monument to regret. Even tried journaling, which, surprise, just turned into a written confession booth where every entry started with "still an idiot." Day 47. But life doesn't wait for you to feel better. Bills kept showing up, O'Malley's kept pouring cheap whiskey, and Kyle? Well, he was now persona non grata in every social circle we used to haunt. Turns out, no one likes the guy who turns personal lives into public entertainment. Karma took the scenic route, but she arrived on schedule. As for Jess, she'd gone full Phoenix, rising from the ashes, wings spread wide. I watched from the sidelines as she started her own consulting business, coaching women on how to build unapologetic confidence, even using their own platforms and content creation to do it. The same photos that had nearly destroyed her career, now part of her brand. And she was good at it. Really good. But through it all, I stayed back. No late-night texts. No, "Hey, saw this and thought of you," weak attempts at fishing for a response. She said she needed space, and I gave it, even when it felt like it was slowly erasing me from her life. Then one rainy Thursday, it had to be raining, because my life really is that poetic, I found a letter waiting on my doorstep. Not a text, not an email, an actual letter. Her handwriting. I stood there in the doorway, soaking wet and holding what felt like the final verdict on the longest emotional trial of my life. I took a breath and opened it. "Hey, I thought about texting. I almost called a dozen times. But then I realized, if I'm going to write the ending to this chapter, it has to be intentional. So here it is, in my own messy handwriting, because that feels more real somehow. You were right, you know. Back when everything fell apart. You said you lost me. But the truth is, I lost myself first. I spent years shrinking to fit inside a version of myself the world told me was acceptable. When you let that secret slip, as painful as it was, it forced me to face the truth. I was still living my life for everyone else. And I'm done with that. But here's the other truth. You did the one thing no one else ever did for me. You stood up when it counted, even if you were the reason I needed it. And after a lot of time, a lot of space, and more therapy than I care to admit, I can say this without bitterness. Thank you. Not just for the fight, but for letting me go when I needed to be free of everything, including you. But now, I'm wondering if maybe, just maybe, we could meet again. Not as who we were, but as who we've become. Tomorrow, O'Malley's, 7 p.m. If you're there, I'll know. My heart hit the kind of rhythm that would have made a drummer proud. I folded the letter carefully, tucked it into my jacket pocket like a second chance made out of ink and paper, and for the first time in months, I smiled. Because sometimes the stories that end in heartbreak aren't endings at all. They're just the parts where the next chapter starts.